welcome to the podium in no particular order. So we have Denise Goodman from Turner Construction. And you're supposed to be able to see it. Sometimes they don't print it on both sides, in which case you just kind of guess. Catherine Best from Duchy Electrical Contractors. Catherine, where's that? Beth DuPont from ONG Industries. Omaris Vasquez from DAS. Vincenzia Aduse from Base Management and Base Development. Alright. V, for those of us who are like BFFs from the ladies' room. Alright. And then our moderator tonight, who is Julia Suchak, who everyone here should know, AIA, NCARB, and City of New Hartford Department of Public Works. So, with that,
Hello, good evening. Thank you so much for being here. I am so thankful to be here with all of you, such an incredible crowd of professionals and amazing people. I'm just going to share first that, I've been pretty spoiled throughout my career. I've worked with a lot of great professionals and, even more important to me, just some incredible human beings. And so on my way here, confession, I was driving thinking, why are we even talking about DEI? Don't we all get it? It's a room full of people who are just going to get it. So what's the point? And then I flashed back to a time where I was getting my master's degree at CCSU, and I was in a class about employment law. And one of the young people in the class stood up and asked the teacher a question as she was talking about employers and what they can and cannot do with their employees. And he said to her, why do we even need that law anymore? Because don't we just know to do that? And so there was this sort of long silence, and then I sort of stared at her to try to figure out what she was going to answer. And her basic answer was yes, we do need the law. People are still doing these things. And so then I thought back to this meeting thinking, you know what? Even if we do get it here, there's a lot of people and organizations beyond us that don't get it, that don't understand it, that don't want to hear it, that just are not doing it. And even for us here, we can even learn how to do it better. There's nothing that we can't learn how to do better. So that's what we're here to talk about. I know I'm not one who likes to have difficult conversations, and I feel a lot of times when I've had this one, it's been a difficult conversation. But anyone who's had children, I've got 5, okay? They're all 18 and above, yes, hello, everybody who has children, anybody who's married, okay? Had difficult conversations, right? So this is just another one of those, and I open it up to you. If you have questions along the way, please don't let us just talk to you. This is a conversation, and it's best when either you share with us you disagree, you agree, you have a question, you have input. I think the panel will agree. We want to have a conversation about this. A real, genuine, open, help us to be better kind of conversation. So with that, I am going to just start off and ask our panelists one by one, and I'll start with Omaris, to please introduce yourself, your role with the firm, whatever firm you work for, and what's your why when it comes to DEI? Why does that matter to you, your company, your organization, your town, your city? Why does that matter to you?
All right, testing. This is the first microphone. Want to make sure it works. Hi everyone, my name is Omaris Vasquez. I am the newly appointed State Building Inspector for the Department of Administrative Services in Connecticut. I am actually the first woman of color to take this position on for the state, so I'm very excited about that. And I've come here today not to specifically talk about some of the kind of motivations or kind of initiatives that my firm or department or company had done, but more about my role as the NOMA CT president. It's a newly formed Connecticut chapter of the National Organization of Minority Architects. And we don't just represent architects, we represent everyone in the AEC industry. So we are here to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion within the industry. And as part of that organization, our vision is to create more diverse teams. that really represent the communities that this state serves. And my why is really more of a personal quest. So I am a first generation American. I am of Dominican background and representation. And I was always brought up culturally with kind of these gender roles that we are kind of brought up to follow. And, sorry, I'm a little short. I need to move this closer to me. I feel like I'm slouching. Okay. So I always felt like I had something to prove. I had something to prove for myself. I had something to prove for my gender and my culture. And I always felt like I had to swim against the current my entire career, my entire life. And I was a New York City native, so diversity wasn't really that evident to me until I moved to Connecticut, and I felt like this imposter syndrome and this lonely only syndrome, where I felt immediately that there wasn't a mentor that looked like me, there wasn't people in leadership that were women or that were minorities that I could look up to and I can learn from and glean from. And it was through my founding, I was one of the founding members of NOMA in 2019, that I met a wonderful group of individuals that have similar histories and backgrounds, and with that, I found my voice. So that's why I'm here today, hoping to at least extend that experience and at least be able to contribute to this discussion today. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Beth DuPont and I'm the HR EEO officer at ONG Industries. Shout out to ONG as we are celebrating our 100th anniversary this year. It is an incredible organization, and from my perspective, in terms of the whys, one, it's the right thing to do. Bottom line, right thing to do. Number two, let's talk strategy and business case here. You know, it's about establishing a talent pipeline. We all have this sort of war on talent. So how do we convince, how do we attract talent to our organization? Three, if you understand these acronyms, OFCCP, CHRO, conduct, there are compliance expectations related to DEIB. So that's the fourth and fifth. Our clients, there are structural shifts in the market nowadays. And as a result of that, we have to address that as well. And so from a client expectation, you know, they're also asking us, what's your story? What are you doing? Is there self-reflection? And how do we get better in terms of moving forward? So for me, there are 4 whys. One, like I said, in terms of right thing to do, of course. 2, it's all about that war on talent. 3, it is about all the compliance expectations that we are required to do. And 4, of course, the structural shifts in the market in terms of client expectations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, everyone. I want to first start by saying thank you to PWC for putting this awesome event together and inviting all these wonderful women in the room. Actually very excited for the fact that I have worked with several of the women in this room, so that's pretty awesome. So the fact that all of us work with each other is what this event is all about, right? Because that's how we grow. We have to work with each other and we have to continue. For those of you that may or may not know, I'm originally from Ghana, West Africa. I'm always asked the question, why are you in construction? And I think it's such a strange thing because nobody asks a man, why are you in construction? But I have to say that growing up in Ghana, my parents were builders. They built road construction. I have 5 sisters and they all do road construction. I'm actually the only one in my family that does building construction. So a fun fact is I've known construction since I was 1 year old. So when I was growing up in Ghana and my mom was working on the roads, driving pickup trucks, and she faced the same thing. Ghana was a newly independent country in 1957. So my mom in the 80s, and she's driving a pickup truck with a bunch of men. And she's being asked the question, why are you driving the truck? Why are you not home? And it wasn't as much, I didn't really think much about it until fast forward to me here in the United States doing building construction, and I keep getting asked, why are you in construction? Then I realized, what she must have been going through. Then I realized that, you know what? I love construction. I love building. It shouldn't be something that's unique in the industry. I love doing it. I think that many women will be in this industry if they were not intimidated by these questions. So I think why? Because I hope that in the next generation, way after me, more women will be in the industry and they won't have to be faced with the why that intimidate them to back away from the industry, because I think we need more women. I think men are great, but men are different. We play two different roles. We don't have to compete with each other. I think we all bring something unique to the industry, and my why is let's keep promoting it. Let's keep supporting each other. Let's keep working together. Let's keep the word of mouth on making sure that more women are coming in, whether they're coming from graduate school or they are, they always wanted to do it, but they never wanted to come in because they were scared. So my why is that let's keep promoting this. Let's keep making this something that is not unusual in this industry. Thank you.
I'm good. So, hi everyone, I'm Denise Goodman, and I work at Turner Construction. I'm a transplant to the construction industry, so I worked in the healthcare and educational system doing community relations work. But was a client of Turner, so really had a chance to be exposed to the, the professional services, the dynamic work that it takes to bring these wonderful buildings to life. And I've been at Turner for 2 years doing a mix of community and citizenship work and inclusion and diversity. So both internally focused and externally focused around increasing DE&I. For me, the why is really the next generation. I've worked for a while and just really had a chance to have a wide set of experiences, some good, some bad, but really just seeing the challenges of being a woman of color, that intersection in the professional workspace. And really just wanting to see for the next generation that there is more opportunity so that they can consider the different areas. I have twins who are 23 today, so I'm very proud about that. And I want them and others to really be able to enter a workplace, feel included, feel like they belong, and feel that the sky's the limit for them. They don't have to be considered as a woman or as a younger person or as a differently abled person, but just as someone who wants to bring their full selves to work. So it's a privilege to do this work, and I'm looking forward to this panel. Thanks.
Good evening, everyone. So my name is Catherine Best. I'm the Corporate Compliance Officer for Ducey Electrical Contractors. I come from a long legacy of construction in New York, iron workers, carpenters, and electricians. I am the only one in my family that studied engineering at Manhattan College and decided that construction was where I wanted to be. I think my why is, I have two different whys. One is the person, the individual, the female in this male-dominated business of paving the way, reaching the hand forward and pulling the people down that are waiting down there to come up the pipeline, to overcome the challenges, to make it better for them. We are stronger in numbers and louder. Our voices can be and get further if we help one another. So that's my one why. My other why is, I was also a WDBE business owner in rebar and concrete, and often would find that the competition was fierce with male counterparts in the industry. And there was such a niche and such control that they had over those two specific areas that it was nearly impossible for a female to become successful. And my company did close because of that, because of the competition in the workforce and in the industry. So I'd like to be there as the advocate to M's and W's and D's. Read your contracts, know what you're signing, request payment terms, get 50 days net payment, not 30, so that you can avoid the pitfalls. Know how to negotiate with your union delegates to request men when they're sitting on the bench. So I want to expose everybody, the females, the minorities, to business pitfalls and how to avoid them and to become successful, to not fall into the trap that I fell into.
Thank you. Incredible stories. The whys are oftentimes the reason that drives us, the thing that keeps us going. I want to start off a little bit high level and then get a little more into detail about your specific companies and what you do. So first of all, this is my question, and you've probably been asked this before, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What is driving what seems to be a sudden spark in DEI? And why do you think it has taken us so long to enact DE&I practices in construction? And so I'm going to give that question to Omaris and Denise.
Sure. Oh, I had to push the button. Oh my God, see my finger. Sorry. It says push to talk, but apparently it's automatic. Yeah, there you go. There you go. Learning every day. I feel that the obstacles, as you mentioned, Julia, the obstacles and the lack of representation has always been there. This is not a new concept. This is not a new discussion. It's, for lack of really, again, these are difficult conversations, right? So we're not here to kind of offend anybody in any way, but it's either people didn't know, they were not bothered to really care about it, or they did, but they didn't think that there was really anything they could do about it. And change is difficult. So I feel that the sudden spark today stems a lot from the advancement that we have in technology, the accessibility that we all have with our camera phones, and social media. So now everything is a little bit more on the forefront. We have a stage, we have a platform to really bring some of these conversations forward. And as we all know, the George Floyd incident, the Black Lives Matter movement, the Me Too movement, right? Those were all conversations. These are things that all have been happening for decades, for centuries, but they weren't really spoken about, or they were pretty much hidden under the table. So at this point, I feel like that silence is broken. And we can no longer turn a blind eye to some of these conversations, and they will be uncomfortable conversations. That's how we grow. We have to lean into it. And I feel that the more and more transparency, vocalization, these conversations, the visibility and representation of many of us to really shine a light in that we are as capable as men and our counterparts, not just as women, but as minorities as well. And then the COVID aspect, I feel, also amplifies all of this. It has this unintended consequence of really connecting all of us virtually. So it's not just a localized, really, issue or transparency, it's nationwide, it's worldwide. We all have access to all of these issues, but also all of these networks, these conversations, these individuals that we can now reach across the country and make these connections. And it's right now, I feel like an explosion of information. Even through this development of NOMA CT, we started it right in the middle at the brink of this pandemic. And what we thought was going to be really difficult has actually really helped us a lot, because we've been able to connect with all of our state chapters throughout the national organization, and again, learn from each other, glean from each other, and how can we move forward. And I think also, I want to take this opportunity to thank PWC for really bringing this topic forward, and all of you guys who are here attending, because that shows that this type of topic is really important and it matters. And I thank all of you guys for being here and listening, because it shows that this is really an important topic for us today.
Thank you.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more, Omar. I wrote some of the same things down around the pandemic, the racial killings that we saw publicized on TV, and just the very radical, polarized democracy that we're in. So the sort of norm of America that you go to school, earn a living, buy a nice house, raise your kids, it's relatively safe, that all went pop in the last couple of years. And I think the next generation and every generation is looking at, well, what really matters? What's real value? What are real priorities? Because if you just take the COVID pandemic, that really clearly said, your life is precious and it matters. So what you do with your time, where you work, how you spend your hours are things that are just non-negotiable, that they need to be quality, they need to have real impact. So I think, for a long time, the the state of the construction industry is similar to others, that being able to have the resources benefit a few has gone on because it's been accepted. And now we're finding, more and more people are, because of social media and other mechanisms, aware that we can't do that anymore and we're not going to do it. I think that demand is there, it's not going to go away. And marginalized populations have really taken that on for a long time. And yes, it's a heavy conversation. I get to have it often in my role, so I'm comfortable doing it. But it has to be said that the industry needs to change, because no longer is that acceptable. So seeing a difference, seeing change is something that I don't think is going to go away. And the pandemic and other things have really just forced it to the forefront.
Thank you. Yes, please do.
It's just a quick add-on to both of you, which I absolutely agree with, but at the end of the day, you have to do the work. You have to grind it out, and you have to do the work. So it may seem overwhelming, and you've got to start small, scale it as the team knows. But like I said, talk is cheap, and you gotta get in there and you gotta do the work. And if you start small, one person can make a difference, and then you become critical mass.
Yes, please do.
It was a discussion.
It is, yes. Anything you want to add, it's open, yes.
I think also in addition to what
And then you don't have to hold it, I think. You can
okay. I think also in addition to what these wonderful ladies mentioned is that with the uprise of work in the pipeline, there's a lot more, let's say, scope involving the AEC industry. So whereas it used to be just one aspect, to do a development, you've got to think about acquisition, you got to think about construction, you got to think about the soft call, the design, the build. So all of that, I think that also opened up more opportunities for, let's say, diversity, equity, and inclusion to be a part of their focus, because you have a little bit of all of these in all of this brand industry that we have. And I think that as more and more young folks are graduating, they're coming out with new skills that benefit the industry in so many facets, and they're asking so many questions. So when you have all of that opportunities coming up, when you have new people coming in and asking so many questions, and when you tie it in with the previous, COVID that we recently went through, is that chain effect that is also a trigger part of this now new recognition to the DEI.
Yes. So with information overload, you can call it, and what else was shared? Getting in there and doing the work, and all of these things. What are the biggest challenges to our profession related to DEI, and how do you think we can solve that problem? We understand where it's come from, so now what are the challenges, and then how do we solve some of those?
I would say one of the biggest challenges, I think we face that is hiring. I'm not sure what is going on out there, but it's hard to hire. We've been hiring, but at the same time, we have not had success getting true talent and long-sustaining talent. So that's one of the challenges that we face. How do we surpass that? I think it's really word of mouth. Tonight alone in this room, I shared this concern with two women, and literally both of them came to me and said, we have a solution for you. So I think there's many different ways of attacking it, but I think when it comes to the hiring, you just have to keep looking. You have to talk to people. You have to depend on the word of mouth with the trusted people. In addition to, of course, the recruiting services that you'll use. So yeah, that's one of the challenges I think we have.
I think from personal experience is one of the challenges, one of the major challenges that I had, and probably the reason why I left my previous employer and started working with Ducey, and I just explained this sitting at the table earlier, is you can have the greatest program in place and you could be boots on the ground as a compliance officer, engaging with your crew and the staff in your headquarters, but if you do not have buy-in from your executive leaders, you will get nowhere. And that was the main reason why I left my previous employer, is because I had the greatest program in place, and they had no buy-in. And as a compliance officer and an advocate for minorities and females, I had an obligation to leave and take that elsewhere. And that's what I did. And at Ducey, I have buy-in and strong executive leadership. The tone at the top is critical, and it needs to be clear, and it needs to be out there. And that is the greatest challenge that I have in personal experience.
Catherine, so I also think it's important, clearly in terms of buy-in, and if some of you are struggling, and obviously we do have buy-in at ONG, otherwise I don't think I would be here, nor would I be supported by this incredible group of women that are here with us today from ONG. So that of course is so important. But if you're struggling with that, you have to have a sound business case. So for all of you that are struggling with in terms of credibility or catching the attention of your owners, you've got to have that strong business case. And for me anyway, it's, I guess the challenge would be, do you know what your workforce looks like? I tend to be a data geek, so I want to know, what does our workforce look like? So I have the business case to be able to support a specific strategy. So, part of that challenge then is, take a look at your workforce. What does it look like? So that would be mine.
Yes.
I'd like to chime in and add to all these excellent ideas because they all really tie into each other, and these are just ideas, right, and options. I mean, again, we start small and we build from that, as our panelists have mentioned, but with onboarding of new staff, with having the support from leadership, I felt that for me, my experience is that there needs to be an understanding, an underlying deep understanding of the difference between equality and equity. And at one point, through my journey through this DEI, because even as a minority, you're still learning obstacles. Everybody has different obstacles. We are all unique, and we need to bring some of that humanity into how we run and manage the businesses, because we all come from different backgrounds and different challenges and different obstacles. And the difference between equality and equity is that equality is providing the same resources and the same options to all, which is great. But there are some of us that have less access to some of those resources and might need more support. And I speak to that just personally from my background because, just having parents who are immigrants, I did not have the opportunity for a really good education. I didn't have really that background to really get my foot in the door. And if it wasn't for that scholarship, a need-based scholarship for that one university that let me get my foot in the door, I would not be here today. And it's recognizing that some of us need extra support. It's building up those boxes so that that person can see over the fence at the same level as somebody else who has privilege and advantages that may not have been offered to everyone. And with that, kind of building that education. And it's a difficult solution, right? There's no solution here because there's HR issues and how do you justify kind of what one needs versus the other. So there's a lot to unpack here. There's no one size fits all, but I think that conversation of really assessing what an individual needs to grow, assessing resources, access to education materials, mentorship, and that kind of leadership to really help build the staff and entice students or anyone else in the industry to really come to your workforce culture because you have more to offer and more to build and more to grow for them.
So I'm interested now in finding out how you're actually doing this. Because, we're talking about all of the issues and challenges and whys, but now we want to know how is that showing up in your workplaces? And that's open to whoever wants to answer that question.
So I think there's several answers to these questions. I think for the women here that do have their own business, I believe that we all have, there's a common denominator that we all have among ourselves, right? That this industry is extremely challenging. It is not easy, right? When you start a business, take a business from $0 to millions, however, what our business is doing in terms of capacity, it's not easy. So with every roadblock, it's going to be a challenge. But I think one solution is, it's easier said than done, but you simply just don't give up, right? You have to understand. I was telling a young lady the other day, says, what's the secret? I said, the secret is don't give up. I said, I promise you it's going to be really hard. I mean, you're going to pull over and you're going to like cry sometimes because it's just that hard. But the secret is that you don't give up. If you have a determination of something that you want to do, you have to just pursue it, and you have to find the resources. You have to, in our case, find other women that you can potentially work with. You have to get the training. You have to get the continuing education, regardless of what industry that you're in. But I believe that the secret really is not giving up, because I think as long as you keep going, you will keep going. So even though it may not be a fixed solution, I think it's one of the most powerful solutions, and I think actually two powerful solutions that I typically practice is that I simply don't give up, and I believe in God. I believe that if I work really hard and I trust in God, then it all comes together. And I always encourage women to do the same thing.
Wow. I'll go ahead and say amen to that. So, well, I just want to add, I think for those of us who are at some of the larger construction management companies and GCs, Turner has done exactly what Beth mentioned. We were very transparent around what our workforce looks like. So publishing that equity audit that makes it clear how many staff members are people of color, how many are women, at what levels, how fast are they accelerating, how fast are they not accelerating. So you have real information. So being very transparent and proactive about that, and asking for it. If you don't know the numbers, I mean, for the most part, you can look around and see the numbers, but having them on paper is a different form of messaging. And then taking those numbers and coming up with a real plan. So, as V's saying, being persistent that we're going to get this done. And, you can't totally change in a day, but if you're seeing year over year, nothing is changing, you're not aiming at anything, then you're definitely hitting the mark. You've got to have a plan of where you want to go. And from that, then it becomes sort of really having this not be something that's negotiable or something that you can back away from. If we're saying that there are no people of color in the estimating department for 3 years, that's a clear conversation that needs to happen. And those are the things, I think, having a plan, having initiatives that you're tracking, that you're communicating, your report, your numbers should be accessible internally, externally, because you need more people to see it so that they can champion it and they can make their part to see some change happen. So I shout out to the Turner team and all of those who, on top of running projects and building buildings, are doing this in their spare time, which is a whole other conversation, but.
Anybody else want to chime in? Go ahead.
I'd like to add something to that. While it wasn't something that was implemented where I worked before, these were some of the ideas that we put to the table when we were faced with the JEDI Challenge from AIA Connecticut. And one of the things we really tried to push, and again, kind of stemming off of this whole kind of getting the buyership from leadership, is and tying back to what I said before about not really knowing what to do about it. If you're in a position in your company or your firm where you feel like you know what to do, but you don't know the how, or you don't know what you need, the biggest thing you can do is look for a DEI consultant. And there are a few, in the state and the country that can come into your office and do an evaluation. And they will assess your pay scales, right? They can meet with HR one-on-one and discuss, is there pay equity? They can review your strategic planning, and that's kind of one of the things that was being done at one of the previous firms I was doing. They were doing this office-wide strategic planning around projects in the office. But then I asked, how are you integrating DEI into everything that you guys are doing? It's not just about the hiring, but even just as an architect, the projects that we do. If you're building projects in marginalized communities, what can we do as an industry to bring their voices forward? People from the community, representatives that can then also be a part of that design process. And with that consultant, they can help you guide through some of those uncomfortable conversations and uncover maybe some unconscious bias that you may think aren't present, but may be really woven deep and ingrained into that culture that wasn't really evident before.
Just one tidbit of information as well. Construction Inclusion Week starts October 16th, 2023. Do yourself a favor, go online, check out that website. There's an awesome sort of score sheet, for lack of a better phrase or term, and that will help you sort of frame out when you sort of your head is spinning because you don't know where to start. So that's a good resource to take a look at.
So when you have your numbers, what do you do with your numbers? So at Ducey, it's about awareness and changing mindset. So we've got several different programs under the umbrella of what we call our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion program. And it starts with Code of Business Conduct, addressing those tough conversations that relate to ethics and non-discrimination. It's diversity procedures, MW, DBEs, SDVOBs. It's the 16 steps that's required by the regulation for your workforce good faith effort and your subcontracting and vending good faith effort.
You go, girl, because that's exactly what I do.
It's finding the conduits to get out there and make it part of your DNA, part of a natural way of life. And that includes getting out there and being boots on the ground with your crew. We have toolbox talks that are not necessarily safety toolbox talk, but they address those critical topics of EEO, non-discrimination, harassment, intimidation, retaliation, whistleblowing. We have our Ducey University platform so we can reach out to those crews that are working in the field or working remotely or working in our headquarters and taking our platforms, taking that information and getting it out there. And that's what we've implemented and where we see our success. And then again, my final statement, as I said earlier, the backbone of this, of the Ducey family and the executive team, that really is what drives this program to be successful. And we've been very successful with it. I mean, we've seen so much growth within our company because we treat people equally and they feel included, and we've been able to expand our workforce into New York. So I think that has a very big part of this executive board driving this and being the backbone and taking all these little bits and pieces and getting it out there to where it needs to go.
Thank you. I'm tempted to go a little bit off the rails.
Go.
According to what we have on our paper. So we're talking a lot about equity, inclusion, diversity, and when I hear it, from my standpoint, from the work that I do, it's a lot of community workers. So they're just workers. So they're starting at sort of the lower level. How do we trickle up, or maybe that's the wrong word, how do we move that up to the higher levels? Because even at the City of Hartford, in the professional levels that I'm in, I'm sort of one of many doing the work that we're doing. So how do you envision, or how are you working to get people to the next stages? And that might be mentorship, it might be sending them out to events, I don't know, I'm just throwing that out there. How do we move it so it's different on all levels?
I think it's a matter of talking to those that you know that may be able to hold your hands and get you to the right person that you can talk to and say, hey, what's missing here? I've got everything that I need. How do I get to the next level? So I think in terms of, and I think as Catherine had mentioned before, you have to get the buy-in from the top. But once you get the buy-in from the top, hopefully the folks that you're working with already that knows the people at the top can hold your hands and get in there. I think this is probably on the level of companies, the medium-sized company among the group. So we have a small firm. 60% of the workforce are women, so they're very outspoken. So they're not shy about bringing anything up to me. But if they were, and any one of the team members came up to me and said, hey, can we get this person? I think I will be open to hearing it and seeing how we get it done. So I think as long as if it's such a big company that you cannot reach the top, I think it's a matter of working with someone that knows how to get you that appointment to the top so that you can explain your case. But you're right, you have to make sure that you are prepared. I'll give you an example as a small company. For years, gosh, Vase's bonding capacity was 4 million. It was absolutely driving me nuts because we will bid on projects where we'll spend weeks and weeks and weeks and it comes to 4.5 and I cannot bid the job. And it was so challenging, it was so frustrating. And I was having literally a big argument with my bonding company. I threatened to fire him. that was just a frustration. But it came to a point of how do I get to 10 million? What do you need from me? Because I'm not going to keep bidding and then going over by a few hundreds and you're going to shut me down. Extremely frustrating. So in that respect, I said, I want to talk to the underwriting company. The underwriting company came from Massachusetts, came to our office. I sat down in the conference room. I brought my notebook. It was a long checklist. I mean, that checklist was actually very frustrating. But I knew that I had to get prepared if I wanted to get to the next level. So I went through that checklist and check by check by check by check. Eventually, we accomplished what I was looking to do. But I think in a similar example, maybe not the higher up because I am the higher up in my company, but in this particular case, when I needed to raise the company's bonding capacity, I had to figure out who is actually the one responsible for increasing that bonding capacity so that I can get the surety company to say, let's go and talk to the underwriting company if it's not you. And I was fortunate enough that the surety company said, okay, we will take that next level. But I still had to get prepared. It took months and months, if not maybe a year and a half, to get from that level where I was to the level that I needed to get to. So yes, it's a combination of knowing people that is willing to help you, but also getting to the right person that can help.
And I think, if I could say something quickly.
Yes, please.
I think Bea makes a very good point, and no disrespect to the larger companies that are on the panel, but Bea is a smaller company, and she recognized, and she called in people that had worked with her for all aspects. And that's I think, what the I mean, I get the largest companies, you got the, you got your certain thing, and they have a lot more backing behind them. So no, I don't want to take anything away from them, but it's not as hard. But for someone like Bea, a small company that brings people together and gets it and talks to everyone to figure out how to elevate everyone. She's got it.
I mean, of course, Bea is one of my heroes, so I'm glad. Anytime I get to spend with her is great. I just wanted to add, in terms of the larger companies, I mean, it can be challenging there to be an employee and trying to advocate for what you need. And seeing the lack of movement, the lack of advancement, you see retention, people turning over. So certainly I would think one way that, has been very helpful at Turner, and I'm sure at other places, is the use of the employee resource groups, which is creating a safer space for people to come together and then make those connections of who do I need to talk to, what's our message, let's look at the data from the equity audit, let's look at employee engagement survey data, see what the glaring disparities are. And just tonight at our table, we were starting to connect around, okay, let's have employees from different companies come together and talk about, we face similar concerns at different companies, big, small, and middle. So how do we really work together to have that common voice? Because, when you have 20 women saying, we're not getting a chance, people listen. If it's the one person, you can be in a huge company and still feel just as isolated. So.
Just a couple things maybe more from a practical perspective. I think you have to think about, in terms of your question, Julia, how do you spot talent, right? And so DEIB is not just from ownership and top down. We all have to be focused and sort of looking for talent at all levels in the organization. So something very practical is after each job, for example. So we're up to 1,000 employees. Pretty much 60-40. 60% of us are associated with 5 collective bargaining units: Teamsters, operating engineers, carpenters, masons, and laborers. And then you've got 40% of us who are non-union. So that provides some complexity and complications as a result of that. But I think that the key thing is when we finish a job, for example, take a look at that staff, take a look at that workforce on that specific job. Who's ready for the next opportunity? Are we focusing on our women or underrepresented folks? And how do we promote them? The other thing I'll challenge everyone else as well is, back in the day it was, looking for emerging leaders and potential. Shift your thinking a bit to who delivered, who performed, and then focus on them. And then let's talk about moving them up in the organization.
I wanted to add a little bit from an outside perspective of course, there's the mentoring and the recognizing of talent and building them up within your organization. But speaking from the lonely only, where you feel like an imposter, sometimes it's hard to have these conversations with leadership. You may feel intimidated by executive levels or other staff that you end up comparing yourself to because you feel that they know more than I do. And there's that lack of confidence, especially at the emerging professional level. So my recommendation is encourage your staff and your emerging professionals to reach out to organizations like PWC, like NOMA CT, the Construction Building Congress, all these other organizations that can build your network. Networking is one of the best ways to grow one's confidence, to build that connection within the industry, to learn from each other, to bolster each other, and to find like-minded individuals. And that's what I found when I joined NOMA CT and we founded that, is that I automatically had a family of about 35 minority and women architects, engineers, and construction managers that I can now leverage, and I can say, hey, I want more experience in this category, but I may be afraid to admit it because I then will be passed up for an opportunity. So learning from them and having them as a mentor from an outside perspective and an outside resources, where some of these organizations and events are very valuable to growing that individual. And if you as an employer can support that and even offer to pay for that membership, because at the end of the day, you're investing in not just that individual, but you're investing in your company.
Right, thank you. I have a question that I'm going to ask, and you can kill me later if you don't like the question. But because it's diversity and equity, and we don't want to exclude anyone, what's on my mind right now is, what would each one of you say when somebody says that they feel like it's a war on men? What would they say when if somebody was to say they feel it's a war on men? That DEI is a war on men.
They have testosterone. Women don't have it. End of story.
That's the science of it all, right?
So I'd like to start the conversation, because these are one of those uncomfortable questions, right, in conversations. And when I had brought up at one of my firms in the past is, what are we doing to help bring in diverse talent into the firm? And how I was the only minority architect in my firm at the time. And I said, what can we do to help, reach out? Because in Connecticut, it's harder enough to find enough staff and talent, right? But what can we actively do? How can we walk the talk and go out there and reach out to universities that we know have a higher diverse population? I've heard ideas from other firms that they would black out resumes so that we don't see gender or where they grew up at or what school they went to. You're basing it specifically just on their experience, right? What are they bringing to the table? And I was responded with a comment, and this is from my really close mentor that I really highly respect, and actually took me under his wing. And it was a really honest question. And I appreciated his bravery for saying it. And similar to kind of how do you deal with the situation in conversation with men, but he says, what about reverse racism? And it is a common concern. This is one of the things that when he asked it, I was really taken aback, because this is coming from a really close friend of mine from like 14, 15 years. And I stood there and I said, this has nothing to do about choosing that minority just because you want to check a box. That is the wrong reason that you take somebody. You take them for their talent, but you also take them for their potential. And that's one of the things that I feel that sometimes gets missed, is that I may not have come from an area of privilege with parents that have a college degree and a background. English is my second language. My skills or my graphics may not be the best. But when you sit an individual across the table from you and you listen to their experience, you listen to their passion, you listen to their drive, you listen to their potential, and you listen for that opportunity that, wow, this is someone that I can mold and really grow, and then that loyalty comes back tenfold, because that is a person that you invested in. And you have to also kind of see it as it's not just about elevating your minority or your women population, it's about creating equity. So if you have that minority population, and at the state, actually, I was doing some interviews for some positions at the state recently, and they have a whole DEI department. And they check not just, okay, are they minority, are they white? No, it's about what is our demographic right now, and what does this organization need right now? And they needed more Caucasian male. It wasn't because they needed to check that box. It's how can we provide a variety of individuals that can bring their own individual perspectives and bring that creativity and that variety into all of our conversations. That's what equity is. That's what diversity is.
Thank you. Anyone else going to brave that question?
I'll go for it. I'm a mom of 2 boys. They're awesome kids, and they are great human beings. But it strikes me that that's kind of, I guess in my mind I was thinking, well, I would say, well, that's kind of dumb. Why would you think that, right? In terms of, we don't need men around, or whatever your phrase was that you used, Julia. And it sort of strikes sort of the antithesis of exactly what we're trying to do here. It's about DEIB, right? We know that the federal government is going to be pumping in $55 billion worth of dollars in terms of infrastructure. We need everybody. We need talent. I don't care whether you're male, female, don't want to disclose. It doesn't matter to me. If you're really good and you've got potential, join ONG. We want you on our team.
No, that's right.
I want to add to that, join VASE too.
So, you're going to answer?
Yes, I was going to add
Go ahead.
something.
Please
So
do.
I think that the question of is the war on men. First of all, anyone that's asking that question, if it's coming from the male perspective, obviously has not done their homework to understand that, and not talking about individual companies, but overall, whether you talk about in the United States or you talk about outside of the United States, Europe, Africa, women overall in the United States and women overall in Africa, you're looking at about less than 1% to lower in the standards of how many women are in the industry. So for any male to ask that question, it's we don't exist in the industry if you look at the grand scheme. So even in our lifetime, I think all of us in this room in our lifetime, we will never get to a point, unfortunately, that's the reality, where 50% of the entire population in the construction industry or AEC industry are going to be women. So it's not as though we are trying to raise to dominate. And like I said, we all play different roles. I think if you are talented, if you are educated, and you want to have a chance in the industry, it's the intimidation that keep women back, that makes women want to be more inclusive of it. So those that are asking that question, look at the statistics of how many women are in the industry in the United States. They earn a lot. So even if we fought so hard to get into the industry now, we still earn a lot. So it is no way that we are taking any work away from men. In fact, we are bringing different skill sets that is a complementary to what is already existing in the industry today. So I just wanted to mention that education might also be a solution for those that are asking that question. It's a war on equity. I think we live in an age where it's so easy to just make a statement without doing that research or doing the background. So maybe women have to educate men the reason why we should be a part of this industry. Not to take away what they have, but to add to it.
Yes.
I mean, I have a 23-year-old son, so, I'm sitting on a panel here with some very talented, very strong women. Prove our capabilities. We've all come a very long way. We're strong, we're vibrant, get out there. We want to be viewed as women that can work along men and perform the same tasks that they do. Just prove yourself, that's it. We're talented, we're smart. It's simple as that. It's not a war on men. We just want to be treated fairly and equally.
All right. So now, somebody have a comment?
No, I said her son probably said it. No?
I would think so.
not, we'll talk to them later.
I know
So-
my daughter does.
So we're talking a lot about diversity. We're talking about, it's not a war on men. It's really just giving an equal chance to a smaller portion of the population. So what is the value? We get these diverse tables we get these diverse voices at the table. So what? What's the value? What value does it bring? You said, prove it to them that we can do the same work. Well, what's the big deal? What's the value? What's the value add? Because that's an argument that is given a lot of times. Diverse voices give X, Y, and Z. So what is the X, Y, and Z?
And again, I cannot speak for the industry, but I don't believe that I can do everything in the construction industry. My skill set is different. I think that I love managing projects. I also love running the company and just looking at the different aspects of the operations. I even sometimes love estimating, although it does take a lot of my time. So there are different roles in the industry that I love. There are also other aspects of the road, of the industry, right? I don't want to sit behind the excavator. I don't want to do the different trades. But I do know women, and I do know in the different industries that love to do it. I think the key is that whatever you feel like doing within the construction industry, whoever you are, you should be allowed the opportunity to do that piece. I don't think it's fair to say that all women can do everything in the construction industry that men can do. I think the statement should be all women that want to do a specific task in the construction industry and they feel like they're good at doing it should be given the opportunity to do that particular trade or that particular management or that particular work within the AEC industry. So I think I just wanted to say that is very critical to say that, because I think you mentioned something about women being able to do everything that the men can do. I think that's an individual question for everyone that loves the industry that we're in. It's what you love to do, and if you love to do that, and if you say to your boss, or if you say as a business owner, and want to stay focused on this, then I think the forces may be and the people around you to do whatever they can do to push you toward that goal. But yes, I cannot do everything that a man can do.
I'm going to add to that as well.
You look up on any of the Walmart and Amazon, Target, on their website, and you ask them for toddler, 6 to 4 or 2, whatever, products to buy for a birthday party or whatever holiday, you will see they separate boys from girls. And everything related to construction is boys. Everything that's related to girls is fluffy dresses. It's a whole society problem. It's very broad.
But we can start in our organizations.
We
And
need to do that. We need
But-
to push. It's like we need to push getting rid of plastic.
But here's the thing though, from I'll say culture and strategy for lunch, right? Let me explain. You can have all the financial, operational, logistical, whatever else you have. But if you don't have a culture built on mutual respect, open communication, it's not gonna happen. So it goes back to culture. And part of this also is that, you have to, and just as an FYI too, diversity, don't forget too, is just not based on, sex, age. Gray hair is a good thing. It's personal experiences. When you said that about, people who say, one voice is just the way to go, for me, like diversity of thought is way cool. Encourage that, and that goes back to culture, encouraging voice, in your organization. Say, it's cool if you've got this issue, let's talk about it in a respectful, professional manner, of course. But for me, culture eats strategy for lunch every day, anytime.
I want to chime in on that Walmart boys and girls story. I have an older brother. I also have a way younger sister. Our gap is a few years, so I was really close with my brother. And my parents, again, gender roles, brought me up with this idea of, girls play with dolls, and they cook and they clean, and the boys plays with cars, and He-Man. Well, He-Man went out the window, because my brother was brought up with that same mentality. Well, oh, you can't play with my cars because you're a girl. And which got me really upset, and I took his He-Man and he flew 8 stories down our public housing building. And that's just how I've been. I've always challenged that status quo. I have a son and I have a daughter. I let my daughter play with his Pokemon cards. I let her use tools. I let her use his construction toys. My son, when he was 3 or 4, wanted a Vampirina comforter set. I said, you will get that. It doesn't matter. Color is color. It doesn't matter. It's not gender specific. So I will shop for my kids anywhere they want. So yeah, it is a culture change, and it starts at home and it continues in the office. And I did want to add that one of the values that DEI brings, again, this is diversity, not gender or cultural specific, it brings perspective. It brings different lenses to solve creative and innovative solutions, or to bring those solutions to the table. How will you know what it's like to live being blind if you're not blind yourself? You ask someone who's blind. How does it feel to be someone in a wheelchair? We don't know that, and how it feels day to day. What are their challenges? What are their struggles? You don't know unless you've been in a wheelchair yourself. And that's what diversity brings. I haven't had the opportunity to work on affordable housing. That's been my passion. And that's one of the reasons I took on being a state building inspector, is because I wanted to affect change. And one of the conversations I said, do I have a seat on the table to talk about when the time comes, how do we spend our state budget? Can we build more affordable housing? Because I grew up in public housing. I am a product of hardworking parents. Oh, no, I'm not talking to you. Technology. They're listening, everyone. So I am a byproduct of hardworking parents and really pushing the boundaries, challenging, asking the whys, and that's what we need in our offices, is that perspective. If I worked on an affordable housing project, guess what? I have first-hand experience to talk towards what these people who are using, the communities that we're building for. I have that first-hand experience to say, these are the things that we struggled with. Quality materials, quality spaces, quality air, quality light. And those often get thrown out the window because they're trying to meet a margin. This is a minimum. We need to push that minimum, and we need to try to really balance and kind of tip that scale.
Thank you very, very much.
So, for me, diversity, it's about fostering trust and transparency, because if your team does not trust one another and they're not transparent with each other, you just have a group of people doing their own little thing, worried about themselves. But when we have trust and transparency, and they're very essential now, you break down the silos, you foster collaboration, you improve company morale, individual morale, you'll eliminate discrimination and inequality, and that becomes a more effective, cohesive unit, and you can work together and accomplish anything. So the trust and the transparency are integral as far as I'm concerned with diversity.
Right, and I guess I'll add, that's one of those questions I probably would refuse to answer, and say, where have you been? But do the work and go and you figure out why diversity matters. Because if leadership is being clear that this is, I mean, just your employee base is, you should be doing that work. But that's a question that I think deflects a person wanting to take any real ownership that things need to change. And it's just a side way of saying, I want to resist the change.
Right, yes. I'll tell you a little story. So, where I grew up in Ghana, in Kumasi, in the Ashanti region, and on my street where I grew up, in Ditcham, so here now we have what do you call it? Ways. We have the MapQuest, the thing that makes you, that tells you where to go, where to turn, what road, what side road to turn. So I remember when I was growing up in Ghana, and people were trying to find ways in my town. part of what they used to go is, go make a left on that street, make a right on that street, and then when you get to the mommy contractor's house, make a right. So mommy contractor in my country is like the woman contractor, because my mother was the only woman that was actually, in construction. I remember some of my fondest memories when I was growing up was when they would let me just sit in the back of the pickup truck when they would go to work on the holidays or on the weekends, whenever they will allow me to. And I used to just love just getting in there and seeing my mom drive and seeing like the workers on the trucks and just looking out there and just seeing her and seeing the whole, and my family will hire community. I think my family gave more opportunities to the communities than I ever seen anybody does where I'm from. So looking at that, I never felt like, there's any other way of doing it. First of all, I saw women from the day I was born just sort of doing what they love to do, working in the male-dominated industry, what it's called now. I didn't think that was it when I was growing up. But also, I think by watching them and seeing the fears that was in their eyes, it also helped. So it was something that, as you mentioned, was instilled in you. So I think we also have to start, whether, I'm not saying it's in the construction industry, it could be in the architectural, any part of the AEC. But I think for those of you, I'm not a parent, but for those of you that are a parent here, I think by instilling that hard work, just your kids seeing what you were doing, I think it makes an impact. I don't know if I grew up in another house, I'll be where I am, I'll be doing what I'm doing. But I think just seeing what my family did, seeing what my mom did, seeing what my sisters do. I'm so proud of my sister. I just went to Ghana and she's got like a really nice contract where she's building miles and miles of roads, and I was so proud. But we don't take no for an answer, we just strive. But I think it's because of our upbringing, it's because of who our parents have done. And I think all of these women just talked about the fact that they seeing their sons grow up in the industry, or they're seeing their family grow up. But it's because of what they are instilling to them. And I think that is so powerful for me looking up to my family and you guys, teaching your kids on what to do. So I just wanted to say that that's also very critical.
Yes. Well, I think our time is up. Yeah. Our time is up. Everybody wants to go home. Why? We're having so much fun. I just want to thank you all, Denise, Catherine, Beth, Omaris, and Vincentia. I want to thank you, and I just want to say, for those of you who are on the top of your companies, hopefully you are inspired to advocate if you're not already doing it. For those of you who are in the middle, I'm hoping that you advocate for yourself and others. For those of you who are just starting, please build a community so you can get there. And our industry, the AEC industry, design and construction, we're building in places where all different kinds of people live, for all different kinds of people. So that's not a reason to include them in the process, not just walking by and saying, I want a bigger bathroom, but to be actually the ones helping you to develop those things, then that's the biggest excuse, that's one of the biggest reasons that I find that they should be involved in this side of the process. So thank you all very much. Thank you for sitting.